Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting history. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story. Alright, welcome to I apologize first of all that this is late. Yesterday was chaotic. I was working on about a dozen things at one time. Angel has started a new job. And that's been adding to our chaos because usually she only works a couple days a week. This week she's been working all week. I was working on the geocache video. I was working on the shadow video. I was working on the members video. So, needless to say, Wayback Wednesday kind of got pushed to the background. But I have it done-ish. And you guys hopefully will see it Thursday. Ooh, excuse me. Goodness gracious, sorry about that. Anyway, I've picked a turtle race. No general reason. Has nothing to do with the video, which is about map noises. But we already did pirates recently, so we're not going to do pirates again. Are you ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for a friend. Let's see who it is today. Alright, let's start. Alright, we got April, we got Barry, my Linda, Lower, Mayhem, Mary, Vaughn, Fine, Hillbillies. Let's see, who else do I see? There's Maya. Unseen, there's Rural, April, Marketplace, Debbie, David and Marcy, and Treasured. There's Light, Love and Live, Phoenix. Who else? Popcorn. There's Stitching. Oh, Crazy Train. Hang on a minute. And then we've got Crazy Train here, which is gaming. As you can see, he's got lots of different games. Here's a fighting game, I'm guessing. Train, it says. Ghost of something. That's a train game. So wrestling. And it's a mystery game. Far Cry. So all kinds of games. Oops, that's not what I wanted to click. That's what I wanted to click. We got some shorts, which are sports related and game related. And then we got some lives way back years ago, but that's alright. So if you're into gaming, check him out. He's at a little over 800. So could use some support. Like, share, comment, and enjoy the video. Alright, finals, the bearded historian is going to tell you about maps and map noises and atlases and the difference between a single map and an atlas, which is nothing, just that there are multiple of them. That's my opinion anyway. I'm trying to decide if I want to run away and soak, but I'm definitely going to get something to eat.
Okay. Hello, pickles, to the bearded historian. This was kind of a fun topic because I've always been fond of maps and atlases and, you know, how people go from point A to point B. It's just kind of a fascination that, you know, when this country started, we were all the way over on the East Coast. And not only did we have to start with, you know, ports and cities, but then, you know, as the country grew, you know, a lot of places only concentrated on their roads around the town, around the city. And so it made kind of a bottleneck when it came to deciding, you know, which way was which, how would you get communications to tell somebody to go from, say Boston to Philadelphia, or from, all the way down at St. Augustine up to Charleston, South Carolina. And then as the country started to expand west more and more often, you were kind of at the whim of the state engineers who were laying out land portions. They had what were called section lines. And section lines were kind of an ingenious little idea that worked okay up here for a while. It's kind of why you get a lot of these roads that are kind of in a straight line, and all of a sudden you get a 90-degree turn, because these section lines were put in basically so homesteaders and farmers could get to their property. The states and the counties were all divided up into great big squares. You had 40 acres, 80 acres, 160 acres, up to 320 that you could homestead on. But, of course, if you were able to prove up and then somebody wanted to sell off their land to you, your land could expand pretty quickly too. But how this little package all came to be was that there were two fellows who were running a printing shop in Chicago in 1856, William H. Rand, and then a couple of years later, an Irish immigrant named Andrew McNally came to the shop, and the shop did big business with the forerunner of the Chicago Tribune. And in 1859, Rand and McNally were hired to run the Tribune and their entire printing operation.
Woo!
In 1868, the two men, along with Rand's nephew George Amos Poole, established Rand, McNally and Company and brought the Tribune's printing business. The company initially focused on printing tickets and timetables for the booming railroad industry out of Chicago the following year, and then supplemented the business by publishing complete railroad guides. It makes sense.
Railroad guides.
You're going to go from Chicago over to Detroit, over to New York, maybe go down to Baltimore. You're going to want, guides on how often you can get on the railroad, where the hookups are. Well, in 1870, the company would expand into the printing business directories and illustrated newspaper. According to the company lore, during the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, Rand McNally quickly had two of the company's printing machines buried in a sandy beach of Lake Michigan, and the company was up and running again only a few days later. That would be ingenious.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, especially how expensive those things were back then. Now, the first Rand McNally map, created using a new cost-saving wax engraving method, appeared in December of 1872 in their edition of the Railroad Guide. Randy McNally became the first incorporated business in 1873, with Rand as its president. McNally was the vice president and George Poole as treasurer. The business atlas, containing maps and data pertinent to business planning, were first printed in 1876. The atlas is still updated today, now entitled the Commercial Atlas and Marketing Guide. The trade book department was established in 1877, publishing such titles as The Locust Plague in the United States. Rand McNally began publishing educational maps in 1880, with the first line of maps, globes, and geography textbooks, soon followed by a world atlas. The company began publishing general literature in 1884 with the first title, The Secret of Success, and the textbook department was established in 1894 with the Rand McNally Primary School Geography. Also in 1894, the company opened the first an office in New York City headed by Caleb S. Hammond, who later started his own map company, C.S. Hammond and Company. Now, Rand McNally would publish the first road map, the New York Automobile Road Map of New York City and vicinity, in 1904. In 1907, the company acquired the line of photo auto guides from G.S. Chapin,
which produced photographs of routes and intersections with directions. Now, Andrew McNally II, son of Frederick McNally, personally took photos of his honeymoon for the Chicago to Milwaukee edition. The company continued to expand its book publishing business with best-selling children's books such as The Real Mother Goose in 1916 and Kon-Tiki in 1950. Well, Rand McNally was the first major map publisher to embrace a system of numbered highways. This is where it became really kind of critical. Because, back then, I remember seeing this a couple times. They talked about it in some of my history shows. Depending on who you talk to, and for example, again, I was talking Boston, for example. You might have a total of 12 different roads leading out of Boston. Now, depending on where you want to go, you might use, the yellow road to take you south, the green road to take you north, the blue road to take you northwest, the dotted one to take you south, and then each of the signs would be color-coded. Some of the places up here, they had what was known as the yellow and black road, because it would take you to the Black Hills and to Yellowstone National Park. We affectionately called it the Highway 12. Of course, the 1416 kind of followed along those lines too. And the big thing also to remember is that this is all before the grand idea of the interstate highway system. That came along a lot later. And back then, we talk about some of the wonderful places that we go driving.
The driving? Diving?
What do you mean I'm bouncing up and down on the road? Well, that just happens. It's kind of a gravity thing.
Is it?
And there were places that 98% of the roads were dirt, and it wasn't until a couple of different organizations started pushing for better paved roads. Otherwise, you'd wind up in a mud pit and you couldn't get back out until somebody with a really good truck would pull you. Now, as they were working with this, creating maps with numbered roads, Rand McNally also erected many of the actual roadside highway signs. This system was subsequently adopted by the state and federal highway authorities. The oil industry quickly developed an interest in road maps, enticing Americans to explore and consume more gasoline. Gee, what a concept. In 1920, Rand McNally began publishing road maps for the Gulf Oil Company to be freely distributed in its service stations. And by 1930, Rand McNally had two major road map competitors, General Drafting and Gusha, the latter which was founded by former Rand McNally sales representative. Now, the Rand McNally Auto Chum later became the ubiquitous Rand McNally Road Atlas, would debut on this date in 1924. Now, the first full-color edition was published in 1960, and in 1993 it became fully digitized. Now, the Good School Atlas, named for its first editor, Dr. J. Paul Good, was published in 1923. It became a standard text for high school and college geography curricula. Later retitled Good's World Atlas, it's now in its 23rd edition. The first Rand McNally travel store opened in New York City in 1937. Now, in the 1990s, it became a chain with 29 locations. But by 2005, all were closed as a cost-saving measure. Rand McNally moved its headquarters from Chicago to suburban Skokie, Illinois in 1952. The company opened its Versailles, Kentucky book publishing plant in 1962 with 300,000 square feet and 23 employees. In 1994, the plant was the first to implement a new Kodak computer-to-plate printing system, and when the plant was sold in 1997, it was over 1 million square feet and employed 1,255 people. That's a lot of people. Now, in 1961, because the company was not satisfied with the ability of existing map projections to create intuitive depictions of the entire world, it commissioned Dr. Arthur H. Robinson to develop what has become known as the Robinson projection, which became very popular and was used extensively for constructing maps of the entire world. Rand McNally began creating maps digitally in 1982.
Digital!
Now, in 1980, Rand McNally sold its educational public operations to Houghton Mifflin. And in 1989, Rand McNally donated the extensive collection of maps to the Newberry Library. Now in possession of Gooch's archives as well, Rand McNally donated the map archive to the Newberry in late 2002.
I would be
That would be cool to see.
I would go in there and I would just be stuck. Because I'd be flipping pages.
Everywhere. Now in possession, with the string of acquisitions and growth throughout the 1980s and 90s, Rand McNally employed over 4,000 people in 4 business groups. The company had been majority owned by the McNally family since 1899, but by 1997 the family had decided to divest its interest. In late September 2018, Rand McNally moved to his headquarters to Rosemont, Illinois, after more than 60 years at the suburban Skokie, Illinois site. Higgins Road was chosen as the location for the new site. Now, Rand McNally has always been a privately held company with stock held in very few parties and very thinly traded. When Rand retired in 1899, he sold his shares in the company to McNally and the other company officers. The McNally family was the majority owner for nearly 100 years, from 1899 until 1997, at which time the family decided to divest the majority stake. The company was sold piecemeal. In January of 1997, the company announced it was selling its book services group, which employed 1,700 people in Versailles, Kentucky, and Taunton, Massachusetts, to World Color Press for $155 million. In 1997, in February, the DocuServe Systems Group, which printed airline tickets and luggage tags at its national facility, was sold to Cohen, Hennessy and Simmons, a Chicago-based private equity firm. In April of 1997, the Media Services Group, which employed 350 people with offices in Nashville, Tennessee, Fremont, California, Shannon, Ireland, and the Asia and Pacific region, was sold to McQueen Limited, a Scottish software company. The sole remaining group, publishing, represented the core map-making business of the company. In November of 1997, the McNally family completed its divestiture by selling its majority ownership to AEA investors for a reported $500 million. Much of the purchase price was leveraged, meaning the company took on significant debt hedging on future earnings. AEA intended to capitalize on Rand McNally's brand recognition by bringing digital mapping to the masses and attracting public investors during the dot-com boom. However, the company fell behind on the technology curve of upstarts such as MapQuest and would fall further into debt. AEA's stake in the company was acquired by Leonard Green and Partners through a prepackaged Chapter 11 restructuring deal on January 15, 2003. In December 2007, Patriarch Partners, which had previously been a minority owner, bought shares owned by Leonard Green and other minority owners to become the sole owner of Rand McNally. In 2020, Telco Capital purchased Rand McNally as the sole owner. Now, Rand McNally has been headquartered in the Chicagoland area since its inception in 1899, had the headquarters on West Adams Street, was the world's first all-steel framed skyscraper. By the 1950s, the Chicago area workforce had grown to over 1,000 employees, and larger facilities were needed. In 1952, it opened a new 283,000 square feet building in suburban Skokie, bringing corporate offices, printing, and distribution operations under one roof. Over the ensuing decades, however, printing and distribution operations relocated, eventually resulting in the underutilization of the aging Skokie building. It was sold in February of 2008 to Ida Crown Jewish Academy for $11 million, and the approximately 200 current employees relocated in January of 2009 to an office building near Skokie's Old Orchard Mall. As of April 26, 2024, Rand McNally no longer has a physical location in the Chicagoland area after a round of layoffs following a merger with Safety Direct. The Irving, California facilities from the acquisition of Thomas Brothers Maps in 1997 closed in 2010, and the Rand McNally sold its Canadian subsidiary, located in Markham, Ontario, in June 2008 to the newly formed Canadian Cartographics Corporation, CCC. Now, William Rand founded his print shop in 1856, and Rand McNally Company was formally established in 1868. The company was incorporated in 1873 with Rand as the first president and McNally as vice president, and when Rand retired in 1899, Andrew McNally assumed the role of president until his death in 1904. Andrew's son, Frederick McNally, became president upon the father's death just at the age of the automobile was beginning, and when Frederick McNally died in 1907, his sister's husband, Harry Beach Clow, became president. Andrew McNally II took over in 1833. He and his heirs, Andrew McNally III and IV, successfully served as president until 1993. And they go through the list here of William Rand, Andrew McNally, Frederick McNally, Henry Beach Clow, Andrew McNally II, III, IV.
Health, 24th. What are we doing?
These are all Andrew McNally's.
Huh.
Apparently, the great-grandson, the great-grandson, the grandson, the son-in-law, Andrew's son. Then they had a guy for, in 1993, John S. Bacalar, who was a former CFO, took over the company for 4 years. Then Henry J. Finberg, former head of the publishing company, took over for 2 years. And then Richard J. Davis, the former executive at R.R. Donnelley and Geosystems, the forerunners of MapQuest, became president in 1999 to 2000. So shortly after that, they kept changing out presidents almost every other year, weirdly enough. Now, acquisitions. Rand McNally has made many acquisitions over its years to consolidate the crowded map publishing industry or to extend its capabilities to new markets. In 1980, the Transportation Data Management were acquired. They are makers of transportation mileage and routing software that continues to be Rand's commercial trucking products. In 1994, they purchased Denoyer Gebhardt. Assets of the School Map and Globe publisher were assimilated into Rand's educational product line. In 1988, the Champion Map, Rand would continue to use its facilities in Daytona Beach, Florida until 2001. All Champion Map products had disappeared, but in 2007, Rand began using the brand-owned street maps for selected small markets. In 1992, Nicholson Holdings, the subsidiary companies, including Nicholson Software Services, Nicholson Loose Leaf, and Nicholson Bindery, were folded into Rand's Book Services Group, extending its printing and binding businesses and adding capabilities for manufacturing, packaging, and distributing computer software and documentation. And then in 1993, All Maps Canada became a wholly owned subsidiary company, Rand McNally Canada, and was subsequently sold to the Canada Cartographics Corporation in 2008. Under contract from Rand McNally, CCC will continue to create Canadian products under Rand McNally name and distribute U.S. products to the Canadian market.
Woo!
1996, Gusha, as we mentioned before, was one of the longtime rivals. Its 82 employees unexpectedly found their comfort Texas building locked on the morning of April 18th with a note taped to the door stating that the company had been purchased by Rand McNally and all their jobs had been eliminated. Gusha's entire product line was discontinued. Ouch. In 1998, the Thomas Brothers Maps, prominent Southern California map makers, best known for the ubiquitous Thomas Guide, Rand McNally continued to brand its street guide products as the Thomas Guide in Western U.S. markets. 1999, the King of the Road regional map publisher and a distributor based in the Pacific Northwest, which had the previous partnership with Thomas Brothers, King of the Road titles are no longer available. So it's basically the principle is that, well, if you're in competition, we'll absorb you and run you out of business. Well, you know, it cuts down on the competition, but also if those particular products help Rand McNally produce a better product.
Right.
The thing I always liked about the Rand McNally is that we picked up a couple of the atlases because, you know, there'll be times where we're out in the country, there's no cell signal. So your Google Maps is worthless, your street maps are worthless, and sometimes you gotta, you know, flip open an atlas for Meade County or Hardin County, or, you know, when you go into Nebraska and different places. Sometimes the atlases are going to be your best source. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times that some roads are not listed on your Rand McNally's anymore. Sometimes you got to use a satellite photo, got to click to, you know, catch an image, and then if you go into a place where there's no satellite reception, you pull up your gallery. But, you know, Rand McNally has been around for over 100 years, and they're still going strong. Every year they publish a new one. The thing I like to do sometimes is I'll look at a map and go, I wonder what the old map looks like. And it's also one of the things I find funny is that me and Sue were talking about the fact that, you know, every state up here, you know, the individual states themselves print out paper maps. And sometimes they're the worst things.
Right.
Up here, of course, we're a tourist company, you know, tourist industry. And so Black Hills and Badlands, every year they print these maps like 1 million times.
Right.
And every year more and more roads disappear off them because the thing I find funny is we'll go to places on the map and it's where the, where the legend is printed on the map. You're like,
right.
We're right where it says Interstate Road.
Right, and then don't let it are important, but sometimes the placement you're just like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, could you pick the worst spot?
And the other one I also laughed at a couple of years back was they went to an Earth Day function at one of the universities, and they had this wonderful map about where they took the electric car. And their legend was right up on top of where Harding, Butte, and Perkins County were. And so I'm like, so there's no electric gas stations in those three counties, huh?
Right.
And of course, the people that printed it were like, because, you know, don't get me wrong, there's some places in the state that there's no paved roads. I mean, I could probably name you all the paved roads in, you know, Harding County, Perkins County, because we've been on them.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, like what me and Sue had done this last week, we went up into Butte County and we drove all the way up Mail Road, turned around, and came all the way down by Nisland. And then we were able to take the Nisland Road south, all gravel, all the way down, and maybe 10 miles short of Whitewood. We were on gravel the whole time. I had no idea that road was even there. But we saw some really interesting old structures, some really old houses, and, you know, it's just having the fun of going out and playing in the roads. But, you know, if you get a chance and, you know, if you're ever traveling like we do, pick up an atlas, flip through it. You might find something that you might want to go check out sometime. I've always loved atlases. It's half the fun of exploring. I mean, after all, nobody would take them, you know, go wandering through Europe if they didn't know where they were going until they ran into a border.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we've gone on some roads sometimes and didn't realize we were in another state until we saw the map sign that said "Welcome to South Dakota." I didn't know we left South Dakota.
Right? I remember. I was just like, wait, what? When did that happen?
Where did we cross over? Yeah. But this has been the Bearded Historian, folks, and we will see you again next week, maybe.
Do we?
Unless we watch it, pause it again. So.
Maybe I'll retire you.
Maybe that could be fun. I do get tired a lot. Good day, folks.